Hey everyone, so I just upgraded to Arturia V-Collection 8, and I also just bought a couple of Yuhi plugins through Native Instruments. They are on sale and the sale ends today. So if you're interested in getting one or the other or even both, I've programmed a couple of similar sounds across the Arturia and Yuhi plugins. We're going to dive into both of them. Let's go. Just an explanation of how I'm going to go through these comparisons. I'm not going to go through every single patch in each plugin. I'm just going to use a couple of patches that I gravitate towards or that I find are good tests for these synths. I've disabled all the effects in all of the plugins and I've tried to level match them as much as possible. I've done a little bit of tweaking in advance to get them as close as possible. I'm going by the sound and not by the knob placements. I actually started with the knob placements while I was programming. It wound up not being completely accurate, especially in the Moog emulations, because Diva is not trying to be a Minimoog. It's a lot of different things. There are no post effects on the recordings. I'm running this all inside of Logic Pro, and you are getting the raw sound from Logic Pro. No EQ, no reverb, no effects, nothing. This is straight up the plugins with their internal effects disabled as well. So the first sound we're going to start with is the classic Lyle Mays lead. We're going to start with the Arturia Prophet V, which is where I initially programmed this sound. And now we're going to go to the Diva Repro 5 on the same. I copied the settings from the Arturia Prophet V, tweaked them to make them sound as similar as I could, and it sounds like this. So what I notice is that in the Yuhi, there's kind of two different waveforms. I couldn't get that second oscillator to really sound like a similar triangle wave for whatever reason. And the pitch drift is much more drastic than in the Arturia Prophet V, no matter how I dial it in. I'm sure I could spend infinite amounts of time trying to get them exactly close, but just for a rough comparison, the Yuhi, the Repro 5, you don't have to be as high up on the knob as in the Arturia Prophet V to get a similar or even more drastic effect. So if you're copying patches from one plugin to the other, you would need to take into account that the exact settings aren't the same. The next sound we're going to look at is a bass patch from the Arturia Prophet V. This is something I was using in a demo quite recently, and it's kind of a punchy, fast analog bass sound. now a similar sound on the Repro 5. So again, and this is going to be something I find in general across the Yuhi plugins, is that they're much snappier and faster and a little bit more present than the Arturia plugins. The Arturia plugins seem to have less output sometimes and are a little bit rounder and are maybe a little more accurate to the synth that they're emulating. But the Yuhi stuff has this kind of very present, potent character in a mix, even without any of the effects or without treating it at all. So now let's move to the Minimoogs and to Diva. I've heard so much about Diva, and I had not purchased it before, really used it much before until buying it yesterday. I should re-emphasize the caveat that Diva is not just a Minimoog emulation. It does a lot of different things. I have really not even begun to scratch the surface of what it can do. But the user interface, when you first open the plugin, is set to kind of emulate and reflect a Minimoog. So I thought it would be an interesting comparison. I thought it would be a good comparison to line up Arturia's Minimoog V, Diva, and Native Instruments Monark, which is their Minimoog emulation, which I also use in the studio. I don't really run it live because it takes up so much CPU, I find. I have also run Monark at my host bitrate. Monark wants to run at double bitrate at 88.2 minimum, but for the sake of this comparison, I have downsampled it to my host bitrate, which is 44.1. So we're going to start with the Minimoog V on a classic P-Funk Bernie Worrell bass sound. Now let's see how Diva with similar settings comes across. Again, immediately punchier, more resonance, more attack. The next one is another bass sound. This is from Native Instruments Monark. This is a sound I gravitate towards a lot. This is a preset called Joe Z. I have downsampled Monark to be at 44.1. It wants to run inside of Reactor 6 at minimum 88.2 or 96K, but I have downsampled it so that it's at the same sample rate as all the other plugins in this test. Now let's look at Diva with similar settings. Again, it's much wider, it's much broader, it takes up a lot more space than the Reactor patch, than the Monarch patch, I should say. just for kicks, let's see what the Minimoog V does on a similar setting. A much more hollow, similar to Monark, but even more hollow and a little bit weaker. I'm sure I could have pumped the output or compressed it a little more to get it to bump a little more the way Diva and Monark do, but very similar characteristics on the envelope as well to Monark, because those two are both emulating Minimoogs explicitly. The Diva is not only a Minimoog emulation, it does so many other things. And then finally, a lead sound. This was programmed in the Arturia Minimoog V, so we're going to start with that for comparison. It's a very punchy, funky, fast lead sound. This sound originally has Arturia's vocal filter built into the sound, but I disabled it because the other two plugins don't have that vocal filter, so I wanted it to be a fair comparison. Here's the sound from Arturia Minimoog V. And now a similar sound from Diva. The Diva version of that patch has more in line to my ears with a 2600, an ARP 2600, or even the Sequential Pro 1. It has a different characteristic for the soloing, and it feels a little bit different under the hands. I'm sure, again, I could line up the sounds to be probably the same, but in my quick tweaking to make this video, I should mention that the default preset that Diva opens up to, the first thing I played on it yesterday, is this kind of ARP-y brass lead that I love so much, and just immediately out of the box it sounded fantastic and felt really good under my hands to play, and made me question why I had never bought Diva before. Finally, for comparison, this is Native Instruments' Monark on a similar sound. So much more in line with the original sound from Minimoog V from Arturia. A similar characteristic in the sound and the way the oscillator kind of drifts. All three of these plugins are eminently tweakable, and with time and learning the plugins, you can get it to do what you want. Are they one-to-one emulations if you have a Moog Voyager or an original Minimoog Model D? Not necessarily. You may need to put the controls in different places, but they all sound fantastic. They will all work in your productions. If I only had to buy a single plugin, I would probably get Diva for the sound, the punchiness, and the versatility of it. We haven't gotten into all the other emulations it does, plus the fact that you can combine characteristics of multiple synths to make your own original creations. If you're looking for the best Minimoog emulation among the three, I would probably go with Monark. Monark is a little more tweakable. You have different filters available to you and other characteristics that are not strictly Minimoog derived. If you're looking for a full-on Minimoog emulation and that's all you want to do, the Arturia Minimoog V is quite good. The only issue I sometimes find with the Minimoog V is that it doesn't have enough output. It doesn't bump or cut through the same way some of the others do. But in a live situation, I have used Minimoog V and all of V-Collection as part of my main stage setups for years and years. I will do another video about upgrading to V-Collection 8. I ran V-Collection 4 and V-Collection 5 for about 4 or 5 years. They were completely rock solid, very stable. So if you're looking for a live Minimoog emulation and a Minimoog emulation only, I highly recommend the Arturia Minimoog V. Thanks for watching. Leave your own impressions in the comments below. I'm curious what you think of all of these plugins. You know what to do with the like and subscribe buttons. It helps me keep the channel going and lets me know what you're looking for in terms of content. The notification bell will let you know when I post. Follow me on other social media platforms, including Facebook and Instagram. I'll see you in the next video.